Greetings, I am Tom Earl. On this week's episode, we talk resilience, energy, and staying true to yourself with Antoinette Chanel. Check it out.
Yay! Check it out. Woohoo!
Greetings, everyone. I am Tom Earl, and this is my year of grace. I know you could be anywhere, so the fact that you are here today sharing your greatest gifts, your time and energy means the world to me. I hope you know that in this moment, you are appreciated, you are loved, and you are valued just as you are. As you can see, I am not alone. I have an amazing guest. She goes by the name of Antoinette Chanel. How's it going today, Antoinette?
Pretty good.
Wonderful. You mind if I introduce the good people out there to you via your bio?
Sure, go ahead.
Awesome. Antoinette Chanel is a storyteller, educator, and podcaster with a unique background that includes over a decade of work in higher education, marketing, and public relations. Antoinette can translate, map out, and put in motion tangible plans to help you and your organization reach its goals. She is the founder of the podcast, The Midday Reset, which she created to offer something uplifting and relatable to people with mental illness, specifically anxiety. She is also an educator and public speaker and is currently developing a workshop series to empower dark-skinned women and girls to redefine beauty for themselves. Antoinette is also an author, and her latest children's book is titled A Book for Black Girls. It's a powerful bio.
Yeah, it is. I was sitting here listening like, oh, wow. Oh, that's me. Cool.
So I always like to start by saying your bio is absolutely powerful. And at the same time, there's so much that can't be contained in a person's bio.
Right.
So what would you say is like, if we really knew you, what would be the thing that we might talk about that's not in the bio?
Okay. So usually when people hear my bio and they hear the stuff that I do, they think that I'm all about business. And I am to an extent, but I also really like to play too. I really like to hang out at the beach with my family and go on walks with the kids and the dogs and just get out of the house and be silly and get away from the desk for a little while and go have some fun. So that's part of what enables me to do the work that I do, I think, because I also make sure to make some time to go and play and have a good time.
Have you always had that balance in the work that you do?
You know, I feel like I have, because I can remember when I was in school, like getting my bachelor's degree, and I was still living at home at this point. And I had planned a trip to go with my friend to Vegas. And my dad was like, so you're doing like all this stuff in school and you're going to Vegas and you have a job, like you make all this look easy. And I was like, oh, I feel like I have to have balance. Okay, bye, I'm going to Vegas. So I think I've probably always been good at that. That's part of why I do so well with project management and helping people with completing their projects, because I usually do well with picking up on, okay, what's the next step and what kinds of things do we need to accomplish to get from here to where we're trying to get. So that's been helpful.
That's wonderful. That's a blessing that you've had that.
I'm very grateful.
Yes. So you have a very clearly defined purpose and mission. Have you always had that, or where did that start to become shaped? And when did life begin to become breathed through that mission?
So, growing up, I grew up in Southern California, and there weren't a lot of other Black kids. There were a few. I won't say that I was the only one, but, for the most part, fitting in was always kind of a challenge for me, because there weren't a whole lot of Black kids that I went to school with. And then the ones that I did go to school with, we weren't always super close. Our upbringing was different. My parents raised me in kind of a middle class environment, where I was always encouraged to strive hard and to be studious. And academics and professionalism, that was huge in my household growing up. But that didn't really help me in terms of fitting in so much because, most of the narrative at that time through the 90s and the early 2000s was all about, hip hop culture and rap culture and, those kinds of things, which I partook in a little bit of that as I could. But for the most part, I was studying, I was reading books, I was that girl that liked to write poetry. I wasn't really playing a whole lot of sports and whatnot. And so growing up, I always sort of had this feeling of just not totally fitting in. And a lot of the imagery that was popular at the same time through the 90s, early 2000s was very different from what I look like. Most of the women who were being marketed as, this is desirable, this is what's beautiful, it looked different from what I look like. These were women with fair skin and light colored eyes, blonde hair, things that were very different from me and other girls like me. And so, that kind of all of these things played on my self-esteem and my self-worth and how I saw myself and the concept that I had of myself. And, I always felt like there was something that was wrong with me. Like, how come I can't just fit in with everybody else? How come I can't just speak the same way that they speak or act the same way that they act and everything would just be easier for me? But it wasn't until very recently that I realized that, that was perfectly okay. I was who I was and I still am who I am. And that makes me unique. And there's nothing wrong with, being different, so to speak. And I wanted to kind of turn around and let other little Black girls and Black women know that, it's really okay to be however it is that you want to be. Like there's a million ways that you can do Black girls. So you don't have to just be one kind of a way where, it's like loving basketball. Okay, she's played basketball all her life and whatnot. I mean, that's really great if that's what you do. But, there are other options. There are other things that Black girls and women can and should enjoy, but I think a lot of times they get discouraged from doing so, mostly because of what everybody else thinks that we're supposed to be doing and stereotypes and whatnot. And so it became clear as I kind of did my own work with, my own self-confidence, working to confront anxiety, because through this whole process, I figured out that anxiety is something that also cripples me when it comes to my own personal advancement. And then just trying to spread the word and let other women know, other people know really that they're not alone, especially other women and girls who look like me, because I wasn't hearing a whole lot of those messages growing up, and chances are they might not have either. So letting folks know that they're not alone.
That's powerful. I appreciate you, walking us kind of through that intimate story of from childhood to where we are today. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Could you tell me a little bit about that period then where you started to find that self-confidence and your voice? Just before then you started transitioning to sharing your message with those around you and with the world. What happened during that time period where you found that confidence?
It's been a gradual progression, but I would say that the real tipping point happened around 2016. And what set this in motion was that I got pregnant with my second child. And I don't know, most women will tell you that pregnancy is a time of like serious reflection, and you're trying to figure out just exactly, how is it that I want to go about this parenting journey that I'm on, especially if it's not your first. So, you've had that introduction period of going from not being a mom to being a mom. And then you have another one and it's like, okay, so what kind of a mom do I want to be? And so I asked myself that when I found out that I was pregnant. At this point, we didn't know what we were having. We just knew we were having another baby. And I just really started setting some intentions for myself that, the kind of mom that I want to be is not somebody who caves to anxiety. And the kind of mom that I want to be is someone who can model confidence for her children. And the kind of mom that I want to be is one that is very clear in her identity. And so I started all of these things right around this time in 2016. It was summertime. And that's what put me on kind of the pathway to learning about meditation and breathing exercises. And, these are some of the things that you can do to confront and manage your anxiety so that it doesn't just, wreak havoc over you. And so through that was where I sort of started. Everybody who goes on a journey for mental health, especially, at some point they turn around and look at the past and they kind of have to reconcile with their past, whether it's, letting go of labels that were put onto you by somebody else that you believed for a long time, or, just finding the strength to believe in yourself in areas where you historically haven't. So I started doing a lot of the personal work of just looking back at my past and looking back at, what have I done with my life? And when I did that, I saw that, I've been able to accomplish some things. I haven't just been sitting on my thumbs and playing Nintendo for the last 15 years or so. And so then, from there, I kind of figured, well, if I know that I'm capable of accomplishing things, so let me just figure out what's working and what's not working. And that has been, I'm still in the midst of it right now, but that has been a really, really huge journey for me to cut out the things that just don't fit in my life and make more room for the things that do, the stuff that supports my mental health and me feeling good and making my family feel good and contributing to the best use of my time as well. And that's been, everything that you can think of as far as habits, as far as bad relationships, I've had to cut all of that stuff out gradually. And I would say that moving down here to Florida, that also helps too, because you really learn who your friends are when you make a huge move. It doesn't even have to really be a huge move either. It can just be to another town. But when you move, you figure out who's really in your corner and who's not. And there were a lot of people who I thought were in my corner and found out that no, not so much. And maybe we need to redefine what it looks like to actually be in your corner, because I didn't want to leave myself vulnerable to that kind of thing again. But that's where it really started to take shape. And through the work that I was doing in therapy, that's when I discovered, because my therapist was the one who encouraged me to do this, but that's when I really figured out that the story that I have to tell, I need to be sure that I'm telling it to people, because there are people who can benefit from it. I used to think that my story just wasn't worth anything. Like, that's just my story. But the truth is, you can't really know until you start sharing it. You don't know just how many people out there can identify with what you have to say until you actually start saying it. And so, and if you do, that's great. If not, that's okay too. I like Crest toothpaste. I don't really go with Colgate. So that's it. I got nothing against Colgate. It's just, I stick with Crest, so that's how I see it too. Like, learning to not care so much about how the world receives me, just how I receive myself, and can I look back and be satisfied with that? Can I be happy with that? And as long as I can say yes, then I just keep moving.
That's a powerful way to measure life and to keep it in perspective.
Yeah.
So now you've kind of walked us to where you started to have the inspiration for sharing your message. Is that when you founded your podcast?
Actually, the podcast didn't come for a little while longer after that, but I started participating in, it started with mom groups. So I was just participating in a couple of mom groups, and we had some like open discussion forums on Facebook and stuff. And I was providing support and any sort of advice that I had from my own personal experience. I was providing that to other women who had just given birth to babies like I had. So this would be in 2017, right after my son was born. And, so I started doing that. And then it wasn't until 2018 that I founded the podcast, because I figured out that if I have a message that I want to share, then I need to share it. And that's regardless of whatever else is happening in front of me, and I had to really start figuring out priorities too. And I had to break up with my boss and decide to go and do my own things so that I would have enough time to be able to devote to the podcast and sharing and helping others.
Well, that's a big one. Because toxic workplaces can be so draining.
Yes, they can be. And what I will say, though, is that I'm really grateful for that toxic work environment, because something had to push me out. You hear all kinds of people talk about this all the time. Like, I listen to Les Brown a lot. I really love his motivational talks. And he talks about how hard he had to work to break into radio. But then he mentions that, sometimes life will move on you. And then all of a sudden, circumstances change and you've just got to roll with it. And that's what happened to him. He thought he was going to be in radio forever. And then he got fired. And it was like, okay, now you've got to go find something else to do, and not get discouraged and not lose your drive, not lose your nerve. And I think that that's what happened with the toxic work environment that I was in. I'm glad that I left. I don't have, no qualms looking back or anything, but I'm really glad that things developed the way that they did, because that's what forced me to quit and go out on my own. At least it was the catalyst towards it.
Yeah. Can you share maybe some specifics, or what is some of the advice that you share when you go to different groups or on your podcast around anxiety or around mental health?
So usually the first place that I start whenever anybody asks me for, input on any sort of mental health awareness, maintenance, habits, I always start with protect your energy. And I can't even tell you where I read that saying first, but it stuck with me because what I used to do is I used to just give my energy away. I would give my energy away by reacting to the things that I saw in the world. So, scrolling social media and seeing things, different headlines, I would react to those. And that's giving your energy away. Taking things personally when things would happen, so like that work environment, I took that personally for so long. And all that really served to do was drag me down even more. It's a pity party at that point, when it's like, oh, why didn't they pick me? Why didn't they promote me? How come they didn't ask me? That's a pity party at that point. And so it's like, okay, don't take that personally. Instead, look at the strengths that you have and work on how you can grow those, cultivate those more. But, that again is another way that you can give your energy away if you start taking life personally. And really just redefining and reconfiguring expectations, as far as the expectations that I had on myself and that I had on other people, many of which I've had to let go of. It's okay to expect things of people, when you have a relationship of trust, I think that's normal. But what I find is kind of risky with expectations is that the higher your expectations are, the more you stand to be disappointed. And so, and especially with people who have shown themselves to just not really be capable of providing the same type of supportive, nurturing environment that, helps everybody. Just knowing not to expect that, you're not going to get that warm, fuzzy hug from that person. You're not going to get that big congratulations pat on the back from this person. So stop expecting it, because every time you expect it and don't get it, that's a letdown. And so, but yeah, protecting your energy, in addition to the stuff that I just mentioned, is also making sure that you take care of yourself and honor yourself first. And that was something that I used to think was so selfish and so mean. Growing up, the message that was communicated to me was that it's important to look out for everybody else, and that you should make sure that other people are taken care of. And then I guess that somehow trickles back to the original giver in some sort of a way. But it wasn't the most sustainable piece of advice, because what I found is that I was running myself ragged doing things for other people and not actually looking after myself. And so I've had to, unprogram myself from thinking that way, unprogram myself from thinking that if I am choosing myself, then I'm somehow letting everybody else down, because in truth, I can't be any of these things that I'm supposed to be to my husband, to my children, to my business. I can't be anything like that if I'm not taking care of myself. And that's a big problem, especially within the Black community, because a lot of Black women in particular are just used to, carrying the load, and it's okay, we'll get through it. And my maternal grandmother passed away when she was 57 because she wasn't taking care of herself. She wasn't looking after her own health. Instead, she was chasing after one of her 8 kids. And as a result, she got really sick and died from complications of pneumonia, which is not something that normally should kill you. But, that's what happened to her. And so I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be somebody who is just so preoccupied with looking after everybody else that she never looks after herself. And I always tell people that too, when I start speaking on, tips and stuff, is that, make sure that you are looking after yourself, because it does make a difference. Just try it for a couple of days if you doubt it, and see what kind of a difference happens when you put yourself first, not in some crazy entitled way, but you put yourself first, as in looking out for you first, securing your own mask first, and then looking out for others. But yeah, protecting your energy is a huge, huge place to start. That's usually where I start when it comes to any sort of tips for anxiety, depression, and just managing life, making sure that you protect your energy.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people listening right now are taking notes, because there were some seriously great advice that you offered in there. So I appreciate that. So I heard you mention at the beginning and during the great advice you just offered now, that aspect of cutting out or blessing and releasing people or things that are stealing your energy. Mm-hmm. And I know that's a tough one for people, especially blessing and releasing people or friends who are no longer, really providing a healthy relationship with them. What advice do you have for people who it's time for them to let go of some of those people or some of those things, but they're finding difficulty doing so?
I think that you should ask yourself, which is more important? Is it more important for you to maintain a relationship with this person who maybe makes you feel triggered on occasion and who adds more stress to your plate in the long run of what it is that you're trying to get to, whatever this goal is that you're working towards, whether it's finishing school or, moving up in the industry that you work in, or if you are someone like me who has your own business and you're trying to get that business off the ground, you have to ask yourself, what's more important? Is it more important for me to have this thing that is really important to me, that I've obviously made some type of a commitment to and that I'm trying for? Or should I just keep holding on to this relationship that's not moving me any closer towards any of the goals that I have? When I did this, I was finding that it made more sense to bless and release and keep moving towards the goals that I had. And the situation just kind of resolves itself over here to the side when you're not feeding it with a bunch of anxiety or attention or worry or things like that. I used to always think that when like if a friendship or some type of a relationship ended, that always was like this big knockdown, drag out, blow up, negative thing. But the truth is relationships can end in very amicable ways. I actually speak about this on my podcast a little bit with seasonal friendships. Sometimes people come into our lives and they provide a purpose. Maybe they show us something that we hadn't seen before. And then that's kind of it. Your paths sort of veer off at that point, and it doesn't make you enemies. It doesn't mean that you guys can't stand each other. It doesn't mean that if you saw that person out someplace, there would be a big old fight or something like that. It's just, your paths are no longer aligned and, you're headed in separate ways, but that doesn't mean that you're in opposition to each other. And so once I figured that out, I was able to find a lot more peace in the bless and release because I knew that there wasn't negativity behind it. It's just me trying to make sure that I stay committed to my goals and the things that I said that I wanted to do. I'm still in the process of this. There are still some folks who I have to kind of adjust my boundaries with right now. And it's difficult. It's very, very difficult. But I'm happy to do that work because I know that it's going to result in a better support system that I have behind me. The people who are in my corner are the ones who know what it's like to be in my corner and were given the opportunity to get out when the door was open, but they stayed. I'd rather have a solid team of 3 than like a kind of shaky team of 7. You know what I mean?
I do. I know exactly what you mean. I use that same philosophy as well, at least for the inner circle. Like there's people who are in my network, but that inner circle needs to be strong.
Right. And sometimes there's folks who you think are inner circle folks, and it's like, oh no, you're more peripheral. And, making that adjustment is difficult. I completely understand, but you're betraying yourself the longer you take to make that adjustment, even if it's hard. And I don't think anybody ever does this easily either. So it just is what it is.
I love that. You're betraying yourself. Yes.
It's true. Because basically what you're saying to yourself is that you are not worth it. I, Antoinette, am not worth it. So I'm just going to put up with this dysfunctional behavior in this relationship because I don't feel like I'm important enough to stand up for.
That's well said. Yes.
Yeah. And I stand up for myself today. That's something I'm really good at now. I wasn't always, but I stand up for myself today because I know I'm worth it.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about the workshop series that you're developing. It sounds really powerful.
Yeah. So, sort of piggybacking on what I was telling you earlier with, my upbringing and how I felt growing up and realizing that there are a lot of women and girls who grow up with those same kinds of issues. I really just want to get the message out there that, especially for dark-skinned women and girls, like you have more options than what you have probably been told about and what you have probably seen as portrayals of, what people in your image do and what they look like. You have several options for how you can find your happiness and find your peace. And part of that, I believe, is in letting women know that they are in control of how they get defined. They are in control of what measures they use for determining their own worth and beauty. And that really can look however it is that she wants it to look at any period in time. I think also too, especially within the Black community, we are so obsessed with remaining the same. And, you have to be the same as you always were. And that's unrealistic because as you learn more, as you grow more, you're going to change and it's okay to change. And so I really just want to empower women and girls, especially dark-skinned women and girls, that they need to know that they are in charge of how their identity gets defined, how their beauty gets defined. You don't have to put all your eggs in one mainstream basket or in one basket where you feel like you're trying to satisfy the demands of a whole community that's all over the place that, you've never even met. You're never going to know all of these people. You are in control of that. You don't have to let media be in control of that. And so that's part of what this workshop series is doing is empowering women to know that, so that they can feel confident and good about themselves. Because I know that most of the things that I have in my life that I count as successes, I was only able to get them when I felt I could believe in myself, when I felt confident in who I was. And so I'm really trying to get more women to feel confident and good about themselves, and little girls too, because we got to catch them early.
Which leads to, you just published a book for young girls, right?
Yes, my latest children's book is a book for Black girls. It's currently available on Amazon, and I'm working on distribution for that so that I can actually make that book a little cheaper. But I'm putting together a tour with that as well, to just go and speak to anybody who wants to hear me, really. But I want to go out and speak to young Black girls and their moms, Black women, and let them know that there are ways that you can empower Black girls to feel good about themselves, but it's not going to be in flipping on the television set necessarily. You got to look in some other places for that. And I want Black girls to also know that they are so much more than some of the portrayals that they get. I think that a lot of times little Black girls specifically get over-sexualized in portrayals that you see in, media, television, magazines, etc. And so I want little Black girls to know that, your intelligence is also something that makes you beautiful. Your personality is something that also makes you beautiful. Your ability to diffuse conflict rather than to start conflict, that will make you beautiful. Your ability to stay feminine, but also, you can still go out and play sports and whatnot, but you can also stay feminine through those things. Those are ways to define beautiful for themselves. That's what that book is all about. So it's a celebration of Black girls, because I could have used something like that when I was growing up, like a book that was just for me, that made me feel really cool. And I was someone saw me, someone heard me, I really wanted to let little girls know that, little Black girls know that they do matter and they're special, and I'm here for you. Even if nobody else is, I'm here for you.
What was the process of writing that book for you?
That one was very, okay, so the first children's book that I wrote, it was just a book that I wrote for my kids. That's also available on Amazon too, if anybody wants to pick it up. It's called The Land of California, because I'm from California. And I wrote that book because my daughter is always asking me and my husband to tell her all about what was California like? What was our house like in California? Does California have mountains? Does California have alligators like Florida? She's always asking that. And so I wrote this children's book about California for her. And through that process was where I located an illustrator, so someone who could do art. And I sort of started learning the ropes of self-publishing with children's books. And so once I went through that first round with the first book and what that process was like, and I learned a few things, I thought, okay, I think I'd like to do this again. What do I want to write about now? And I just kind of thought to myself, well, what kind of a book would you have liked to have read when you were a kid? And then that's what sort of triggered, maybe I should write a book for Black girls to make Black girls feel good about themselves, because I could have used more of that. And so the same the same illustrator who did the art for the first book, I showed her the script for the second one, and I asked her, this is something you feel like you want to be a part of, just let me know. And she was like, yes, absolutely. So she did an excellent job. She really brought my vision to life. And we had worked together already on the previous book, and I really liked the working relationship that we developed there. But then when we got to work on a book for Black girls together, that really cemented that, any children's books that I do, I think I'm going to try to go back to this woman and have her do illustrations for them. And so, it was it was a very like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, it was like I wrote the book and then it was done, and then I showed it to the artist, and then she started on the art. And then a few months after that, the art was finished, and I had to figure out how to compile it. And I compiled a few copies of it, just, did the design and stuff for the internal, external, put it up on Amazon. But now that it actually exists and it's a thing, that whole process is different too, taking it around and showing it to people and figuring out how to get it printed in bulk and just purchasing ISBNs and everything. Like it's been a learning process. So it moves a little slower than I would like. I tend to be kind of impatient, but overall I'm very, very pleased that I followed through on it, and I'm still planning to do a lot more work with it, which includes a coloring book for Black girls. So the art that is in the book, we actually have the ink drawings so that kids can color them in. The tour that I mentioned to you, and then who knows, there might even be a book for Black girls too. So we'll see.
That's wonderful. And I appreciate you inviting us in, because it seems like, oh, the book's here, but there's so much that goes into it.
There's really a lot. I mean, I think that all authors and people who want to publish works have a difficult road ahead of them. I am choosing to stay independent on purpose because it's just what I would like to do. And that's hard. But I mean, I know people who work with agents and they have a hard time too. It's just anything that is worthwhile like that, such as leaving behind a written work, it's going to take time and it's going to be work. But yeah, it was definitely from start to finish, from when I got the book written to when I actually had it in my hand. That took about 9 months. 9 months from start to finish. And that's pretty fast from what I hear.
I know you've already been mentioning it and sharing it, but in case you want to share anything else, if there is any young Black girls listening right now, what would be the message from your workshops, your book, your podcast? What would you want them to hear?
Just be yourself. So whatever that looks like, just be that person. And for me, that was a girl who grew up listening to rock, who played guitar, who went surfing, because I'm from Southern California. Those are the things that I like to do. I was involved with speech and debate. I was a tutor in college. I did some student teaching. I served as an intern for one of my mentors at my alma mater. But those were the things that I did. And in certain instances, people would make fun of me, like, why are you doing that? There's nobody else that looks like you that's doing that. So what makes you think that you can go do that? But you don't have to listen to any of that. If it's something that makes you happy, then that's your soul calling to you, and you should answer it. That not doing so is like pressing decline on yourself when you call yourself, and you shouldn't do that. You're the one person that you have to listen to. And so you should just be yourself. And anybody who doesn't like it, they can step aside. And people who are supportive, those are the ones that you want in your corner anyway. So all of it just kind of shakes. It works itself out once everything gets settled. So in the moment, it might not feel that great, but stay true to who you are and what you like, and pursue those passions fully, because you have every right to, just like anybody else does. And even though you might feel alone, one day you probably will meet somebody else who does what you do, and you'll be so happy. Like, yes, I finally met someone else who is like this and who's interested in these things that I like. And that's a nice feeling. I'm not saying that I'm going to be that person for all of the Black girls that I meet, but I definitely want to encourage them that, if there's something that you feel like you want to do and you just want to try it, and the only thing that's holding you back right now is that you're afraid that you won't find the same company, like people who look like you, once you go and do that, don't let that stand in your way, because that doesn't matter. You want you want your circle to be comprised more of people who think and act like you than people who just look like you. That's important if you want to find true peace.
I love the analogies that you use, the hitting decline on yourself. It's so powerful.
Yeah, but these are the things that I had to learn as I was like going through all this personal work and writing things down in my journal and noticing some of these habits that I had with my thought process. I was like, man, Antoinette, it's kind of like you have been shutting yourself out for a while, and maybe let's try not doing that. Let's try working with yourself and, see what comes from that. And the results have been a lot better. So, don't hit decline on yourself.
I love that. So you might have heard me say at the beginning that this is my year of grace. So my intention with whatever my year is to not only explore it in my life, but to have a conversation about it with my guests. So for you, what is grace?
For me, grace is not harping on every little thing that goes wrong, because we're all humans and people make mistakes, and sometimes things don't go as you want them to or as planned. But it just is what it is. We're not the ones who are in control. And so to me, I think that grace is when you can just roll with the punches and, okay, so, this reservation we were supposed to have at this nice restaurant didn't get recorded. And now you've got the hostess up here feeling really bad and really embarrassed. And it's a crowded Friday evening. And what are you going to do? Are you going to bite her head off because of a mistake that happened that, no, it shouldn't have happened? You were looking forward to this evening, but alas, here you are. It has happened. What are you going to do? Are you going to flip out in that moment? Or are you going to say, you know what? It's okay. She's probably going to run to the back and figure out, well, how can we work with these people? Can we find an extra table? Can we give them a gift card, something? But you just have to stay patient, and you don't have to respond especially in a way that is of anger. Our world is very accustomed to trying to get us to react to things. Social media is all about the reaction. Like, let's go for the shock value. What's going to get people's attention? And most of the things that get people's attention are the kind of low vibrational things, like a half naked woman or, some kids pulling some destructive pranks on each other. That usually gets people's attention. And I'm not knocking it. I've watched my share of fail videos too. But, grace to me is when you can default to responding rather than reacting to the world. So, when people push your buttons and get under your skin, instead of lashing out and, putting them in their place and reading them and dragging them for the filth, which I've been known to do in my time, but instead of doing that, decide that, you know what, I'm going to be an observer of this rather than an absorber of this. And if I want to provide a response to this, I will. Or I won't, because sometimes it's not needed. Sometimes some people put out a vibe that, maybe just let that simmer in and of itself. You don't have to add anything. But that's what grace is to me, not sweating all the small stuff and, staying pleasant and calm and centered, even at a time when, things are kind of going crazy. Just this morning, I had gone to this tire place that's here in town to follow up on an estimate that I got from like 2 months ago. I'd been putting off changing the tires on my car, but I went in there today and I thought, okay, let me see if I can just get that estimate again and schedule the appointment for the new tires. And when I got there, the place was really, really packed. It was Monday morning. And so, I think a lot of people had stuff happen with their cars over the weekend. And so they were coming in and trying to get repairs and whatnot. And so the woman who was at the front desk handling the phones, the computer, and everybody coming up to the counter, she was swamped. And so I explained to her what was going on. And she was like, okay, I need you to step aside for a second while I handle all of this. And I said, okay, yeah, sure, no problem. And I mean, it took like maybe 20, 30 minutes. And by the time she circled back around to me, they were able to go and figure out which tires I needed. They had them in stock. And they said, if you can wait 20 minutes, we can put these tires on your car right now. And out the door, I ended up paying $70 less than what she had originally quoted me, all because I was willing to be patient and understanding of the situation that happened this morning. And I mean, the old me probably would have been like, this is ridiculous. You've had me waiting for 15 minutes. And it's like, okay, yeah, it's not fun when you have to sit and wait and you have to be patient and things are taking longer than you want them to. But who really does want that though? I mean, when people say like, oh, why did this happen to me? Okay, well, who would you rather that it have happened to? Like point to somebody who you'd rather give that problem to. Come on, that's just. Anyway, I'm on a tangent now, but that's what grace is to me. I hope that answers your question.
That was the best. There were so many gems because I asked this question every single time. I loved the what was it? Responding rather than reacting. That was so awesome. And your story was perfect because I was driving home last night with Ladora and it was maybe 9:30 at night and we hit bumper to bumper traffic. And I was like, oh, this is why we don't go out on Sundays. And she's like, calm down. It's only going to take a minute. Let me put on a nice podcast. And we ended up having an amazing time talking and hanging out during the traffic jam. So
yeah.
That initial relax on that.
Right. And just, another book too. I don't know if you've read it. I don't know if your listeners have read it, but The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. I really love that book because it's kind of a blueprint for a happy life if you think about it. It's a really short book. It's very simple, but the stuff that's in it is so powerful. And he talks about how you cast spells with the words that you use. So in that moment, you're sitting there and you're frustrated because of all this traffic and stuff. And it's like, oh no, if she feeds into that and starts adding to that, then your whole car is just filled with this negative energy. And it's like, oh man, is that really what you want to do? I mean, yeah, the traffic sucks, but you can't do anything about that. So how can you make this the most enjoyable, piece of time that you're going to spend on the road, which that's good. I'm glad that she was able to kind of shift the tides with that a bit. Cause I would imagine you guys probably hit a lot of traffic out in California. We were hitting lots of traffic when we lived in California all the time.
Yeah. That's the one, be impeccable with your words. Right?
Yes. Like just don't go getting reckless with your words. Don't go, just stop yourself and decide if that's really what you want to say. Chances are it's not. You're just frustrated in the moment, which you're allowed to be frustrated, but let that moment pass before you actually act and start speaking, because you give an impression of yourself when you speak. And for a long time, I was giving the impression that I was a much more angry person than I actually am or want to be. So that's also something that kind of keeps me from responding and lashing out quite as much, because, I want to choose my words wisely. And even if that means I choose silence for a while until I have the words, that's perfectly okay too. And people who don't want to honor your silence, that's another one of those criteria that I have for, well, maybe this relationship isn't one that is serving me. It's not to say that you get to give people a silent treatment for hours and days and weeks on end, but if you're not ready to respond to something yet, it's okay to not have a response. And anybody who's demanding that of you probably isn't honoring your space and your time and, who you are as an individual.
Well said. Well, Antoinette, I want to thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. You are truly gifted with words and communicating, complex concepts in very accessible ways. So I really appreciate that.
I appreciate this interview too. It was nice to get to chat and share a little bit of what I do. And I think that year of grace is pretty awesome. I'm going to see how I can integrate parts of that into what I do, because more grace is always needed, I think, in our world.
Agreed. Yes, definitely. So for the folks who want to reach out to you and tell you how awesome you are and share with you, what they're going through and how they connected with your book, which I know they're going to buy, where can they do that?
Okay, so you can follow me on Instagram. You can follow me at the Midday Reset. The website for the Midday Reset is actually being worked on right now. So I'm going to get a new email address to go with that one. But for right now, people can email me at themdrpodcast@gmail.com. I would say those are probably two of the biggest ways that you can get in touch with me. You can also find me on Facebook under Antoinette Chanel. And yeah, I pop around. I appear on other people's podcasts every now and then. And so you'll probably see me again someplace. But yeah, I love hearing from people. So anybody who wants to reach out to me, please, please, please feel free. Even if it's just to say hi and I thought you were funny on that podcast.
So show notes for people on the go, tomrell.com/Chanel. Is that okay if we use your last name for the...
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, perfect. tomrell.com/CHANEL, tomrell.com/Chanel. You'll find the Instagram links and also the Amazon links for Antoinette's book. You can find it all there if you're on the go. So once again, Antoinette, thank you so much. This has been such a blessing.
Thank you, Tom. I've had a good time.
I'm glad to hear that. Our ritual for closing out our interviews is for you to share an invitation with those who are listening. So what would you like to invite people to do, to be, to consider, to think about, to become? What's your invitation?
So I have these Midday Reset affirmation cards. And I think I'm going to read off one of these, which says, new habit, start each day by listing 3 things you are grateful for. Try to think of new things or reasons each day of the week before allowing yourself to repeat. Gratitude is the universal feel good, meaning no matter what you are going through, you won't feel quite as bad after reflecting on all that you have to be grateful for. So I'm gonna leave that affirmation with you guys for my invitation. I invite you to pick up this new habit of listing 3 things that you're grateful for every day.
I love that. I'm a huge fan of gratitude.
Me too. It solves everything. Like just be grateful.
Well, once again, thank you so much. I know those listening appreciated it. So I do as well. Thank you. And to all those who are listening or watching, as always, we are wishing you peace and blessings. Thank you. One more thing. I'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to join me at tomrell.com/join. Subscribe below, or let's connect on social media. Tom Earl Artist. Thanks again for watching.